Good morning from the Russian Mission Control Center in the town of Korolyov on the outskirts of Moscow as we begin our morning-long coverage of the homecoming of three of the crew members of the Expedition 45 crew aboard the International Space Station. Here in Korolyov, the Russian Flight Control Team is on console, ready to supervise the homecoming of Kjell Lindgren of NASA, Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Soyuz Commander Oleg Kononenko. They're in the final stages of preparations to say goodbye to their other three comrades who have been aboard the International Space Station with them, the Expedition 45 Commander Scott Kelly, Sergei Volkov, and Mikhail Kornienko, with the three returning crew members preparing to enter their Soyuz TMA-17M vehicle that is docked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station for an undocking that is scheduled at 3:49 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time this morning, less than 3 hours and 50 minutes from now. The Soyuz TMA-17M has been activated after the crews say goodbye to one another and close the hatches between the Rosviet module and the Soyuz spacecraft, to which it has been docked since July 23rd. The Soyuz will be transferred to autonomous power. The crew will depressurize the vestibule interface between the small passageway between the docking interface between the Soyuz and the Rosviet module, and then they'll climb into their Sokol launch and entry suits and begin pre-undocking preparations that will result in a landing after sunset on the steppe of Kazakhstan to the northeast of the town of Zhezkazgan. We'll talk more about landing preparations in just a moment. The Russian Flight Control Team here in Korolyov is working with their U.S. counterparts half a world away at the Johnson Space Center in Houston in the ISS Flight Control Room. The Orbit 1 team of flight controllers is on console at this hour, having conducted a handover from the overnight shift a short time ago. The Orbit 1 team that will work with the Russian Flight Control Team this morning through the landing and homecoming of the Expedition 45 crew. On console at this hour is Flight Director Zeb Scoville. He is in the middle of your screen. To his right at the top of your screen is spacecraft communicator Rebecca Wingfield, who will be talking directly to the space station crew throughout the course of the morning. As we mentioned before, this is the end of the road for Oleg Kononenko, Kjell Lindgren, and Kimiya Yui. They have had a jam-packed, action-filled increment since arriving on board on July 23rd. Kononenko will return home after a stay of 141 days on orbit and 533 days accumulated during his three space flights. For Lindgren and Yui, they're wrapping up their first space flight in their careers of 141 days since they were launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan and 141 days aboard the International Space Station. During that period of time, Kjell Lindgren conducted two spacewalks with Scott Kelly, and just 2 days ago used the Canadarm2 to grapple the orbital ATK Cygnus cargo craft that was ultimately berthed to the Earth-facing port of the Unity module of the International Space Station. The International Space Station at this hour is flying 253 statute miles above the South Atlantic, just crossing over the Southern Ocean south of South Africa, about to begin a southwest and northeasterly track that will carry it across the Indian Ocean and across Asia a short time from now.
Moscow Station, Space to Ground 1. Go ahead.
There's a good view from the station side of the docking interface between the Soyuz TMA-17M spacecraft and the Rossviet module. Just inside the hatchway, you see one of the three Sokol launch and entry suits that will be worn by the returning crew during their descent back into the Earth's atmosphere for a landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan that is scheduled at 7:12 and 14 seconds p.m. Or AM, I should say, Central Time this morning, which will be 7:12 and 14 seconds p.m. at the landing site in Kazakhstan, about 78 miles to the northeast of the remote town of Zhezkazgan. It will be the first post-sunset landing in space station history. It will be the sixth night landing overall for a Soyuz vehicle in the history of the International Space Station, and the first such night landing since Yuri Malenchenko, Sonny Williams, and Aki Hoshide landed on November 19th, 2012 to conclude Expedition 33. Their landing was 1 hour before sunrise. The search and recovery forces deployed to the town of Zhezkazgan yesterday in an Antonov 12 aircraft, one of the airborne flying command and control aircraft that will relay data and voice communications from the Soyuz vehicle to the flight controllers here at the Russian Mission Control Center during the course of the Soyuz's descent for its landing. The weather has been a bit challenging on the steppe of Kazakhstan throughout the course of this week. The forecast for landing time calls for an overcast ceiling at 700 feet. Winds out of the southwest at about 17 knots, gusting to 27 knots. The temperature at landing time is expected to be 26 degrees Fahrenheit with a wind chill factor of just 12 degrees Fahrenheit. The weather could call for some snow flurries also. Several inches of snow were present on the steppe of Kazakhstan, more toward the original staging city of Karaganda to the northeast of where Kononenko, Yui, and Lindgren will touch down several hours from now. The landing is scheduled an hour and 43 minutes after local sunset. The search and recovery forces that comprise the Rosaviatsia Civil Air Patrol, who are in charge of landing operations in Kazakhstan, have transmitters and receivers to receive both high-frequency and very high-frequency HF and VHF voice from the Soyuz vehicle. There are locator beacons, iridium satellite phones, handheld global positioning system locators, and ground tracking and the fixed-wing aircraft surveillance with a great deal of experience in night recoveries of other civil aviation aircraft. And the Soyuz vehicle with the three crew members on board will be no different in the post-sunset hours on the steppe of Kazakhstan once the Soyuz TMA-17M touches down. We're about 18 minutes away from the time that Kononenko, Lindgren, and Yui will be prepared to say farewell to their counterparts in the Russian segment of the International Space Station and make their way through that hatchway to begin the process of climbing into their launch and entry suits and to begin the process of activating and checking out all of the Soyuz systems that will be in play during the course of today's pre-undocking preparations. As we await the final farewells and the hatch closure between the crews, you're looking at Space Station Commander Scott Kelly, who has been working to unload cargo from the Cygnus cargo vehicle, the orbital ATK Cygnus cargo spacecraft that arrived at the space station 2 days ago with all of its cargo intact and in good shape. It was a textbook rendezvous and a grapple by Lindgren in one of the final major activities that he conducted on his tour of the International Space Station. A good view of Kimiya Yui there in the field of view, who a few minutes from now will be making his way into the Soyuz spacecraft that will take him, Oleg Kononenko, and Kjell Lindgren home for a post-sunset landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. Yui will be strapped into the left seat of the Soyuz vehicle as the board engineer. Kononenko will be in the center seat as Soyuz commander, and Lindgren will be in the right seat. That will be their seating configuration for landing as it was for launch 141 days ago. At the time of undocking, Expedition 45 will be over, technically in terms of the record books, and Expedition 46 will formally begin with Scott Kelly retaining his role as commander through the time that he comes home on the night of March 1st, U.S. time, the morning of March 2nd of next year, along with Mikhail Kornienko and Sergei Volkov to wrap up the one-year mission of Kelly and Kornienko. Volkov arrived on the International Space Station in early September and will be the Soyuz commander to bring home the two one-year crew members, Kelly and Kornienko. As we mentioned before, the returning crew members of Expedition 45, Kononenko, Lindgren, and Yui, will be landing in a few hours, having spent 141 days aboard the International Space Station. That is the log for Lindgren and Yui in their first flight into space. Kononenko will have logged 533 days in space on his 3 flights. That puts him 13th on the all-time endurance list. The trio will have completed 2,256 orbits of the Earth, will have traveled 59.6 million miles. Lindgren, in his 2 spacewalks that he conducted with Scott Kelly several weeks ago, totaled 15 hours and 4 minutes of spacewalking time. The crew having greeted the most recent HTV-5 Japanese cargo vehicle, one Progress resupply vehicle, and the orbital ATK Cygnus resupply vehicle that we showed you Scott Kelly in just a few minutes ago. The crew also, in September, greeted the first Dane to fly in space, Andreas Mogensen, as part of a visiting crew operation, and only the 3rd Kazakh citizen to fly in space, Aydin Aimbetov, who delivered a brand-new Soyuz vehicle to the International Space Station. As we mentioned, the countdown clocks are ticking backward toward the time of the undocking. A command will be sent to open up the hooks that have held the Soyuz TMA-17M vehicle in place to the Rosviet module since its arrival back on July 23rd. The undocking scheduled at 3:49 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time. A separation burn will move the Soyuz away to a distance ultimately of about 8 kilometers or so from the International Space Station for a 4-minute, 40-second firing of the Soyuz engines and a braking maneuver to allow the Soyuz to drop out of orbit for its high-speed reentry back into the Earth's atmosphere. Several minutes later, at 6:46 a.m. Central Time, the 3 modules comprising the Soyuz vehicle will pyrotechnically separate the descent module, the center section, the only module of the Soyuz that survives the heat of reentry. As the Soyuz barrels toward its landing site, the command will be issued to open up the parachute, first a drogue chute, followed by the sprawling main parachute, under which the three crew members will descend to their landing site, with touchdown expected at 7:12 and 14 seconds a.m. Central Time, which will be 7:12 and 14 seconds p.m. at the landing site, some 78 miles to the northeast of the town of Zhezkazgan, where the search and recovery forces will be waiting to recover the crew and to bring them back to Karaganda, Kazakhstan, to the northeast of the landing site. The search and recovery forces, again deployed yesterday to the town of Zhezkazgan, just to the southwest of the landing site. The landing team is assisted by a total of 12 Russian Mi-8 helicopters, 8 of which will be flying in a racetrack pattern around the landing zone to the northeast of Zhezkazgan. 2 Mi-8 helicopters will be midway between the prime landing site and the ballistic landing site to the southwest. That would be in play in the unlikely event that the Soyuz would experience a problem on the way down that would result in a landing short of the landing site by several hundred kilometers. There are also 2 Mi-8 helicopters that are pre-positioned near the city of Baikonur, the launch site, for the launch coming up of 3 new residents of the space station. They'll be with rotors running, set to take off from the Yublini airfield near the Baikonur Cosmodrome if a ballistic landing is triggered by some problem on board the Soyuz. That is not expected, of course. The 12 Mi-8 helicopters, as part of the Russian search and recovery forces, are augmented by 2 Antonov fixed-wing aircraft that will serve as flying command and control relay stations to relay the voice and data from the Soyuz vehicle as it heads toward its landing site. A complement of all-terrain vehicles will be standing by in the vicinity of the landing site as well to transport the crew from their Soyuz vehicle once they're extracted from the Soyuz and placed in reclining chairs to have an opportunity to get their landing legs back after 141 days of weightlessness. After the crew has had a period of time at the landing site, it remains to be seen whether or not the weather at the landing site in the post-sunset hours will permit a medical tent to be erected and for post-medical testing to occur right there at the landing site, or whether they load the crew right back on the helicopters to fly to Karaganda for those activities. We'll see how the landing activities are dispositioned later on during the course of the day. In any event, the 3 crew members will ultimately return to Karaganda on 3 separate helicopters, about a 2-hour flight from the landing site, where they'll participate in a post-landing ceremony, a traditional Kazakh ceremony, and then they'll part ways with Yui and Lindgren boarding a NASA plane for a flight back to the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Kononenko will board a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft for a flight back to Chkalovsky Airfield, just outside of Star City, Russia, the training base for the cosmonauts, where he'll be reunited with his family. The situation report we're receiving from Zhezkazgan in Kazakhstan from the NASA landing team support personnel is it is currently 20 minutes after 12 in the afternoon in Kazakhstan, 3 hours ahead of Moscow and 12 hours ahead of Houston. The report is that the temperatures are extremely cold It's a gray, overcast day, which leads us to believe that there will be virtually no opportunity. We can't guarantee it, but the strong likelihood is that we will not be seeing the Soyuz descending under its parachute toward the landing site as we have enjoyed during recent daylight landings, the last several Soyuz landings. But of course, we'll be monitoring the progress of the Soyuz as it descends back into the Earth's atmosphere toward its landing site, and a safe landing for the 3 crew members who are departing the International Space Station after 141 days. We should be about 3 minutes away from reacquiring our downlink television signal from the International Space Station, at which time we should be seeing the departing crew members, Kononenko, Lindgren, and Yui, have an opportunity to say farewell to their 3 counterparts that they have spent almost 5 months on board the station with, as Kelly, Kornienko, and Volkov remain a 3-man crew for only 4 days. This is the busiest period in space station history that anyone can recall, as final preparations are underway at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan for the launch just 1 hour before sunset on December 15th of the next trio of residents who will fly to the International Space Station. From top to bottom, European Space Agency flight engineer Tim Peake, Soyuz commander Yuri Malenchenko, about to embark on his 6th flight into space, and NASA flight engineer Tim Kopra are wrapping up their final preparations for launch. They'll be launching on December 15th on the Soyuz TMA-19M spacecraft that will launch at 5:03 a.m. Central Time, 5:03 p.m. Baikonur time on December 15th on a 4-orbit, 6-hour rendezvous, a fast-track rendezvous, to reach the International Space Station and dock to the same Rosviet module to which Lindgren, Kononenko, and Yui will be departing a few hours from now. You're looking at the lineup of our launch day events from launch through hatch opening that will occur over the course of several hours on December 15th. Once they arrive on board, Peake, Malenchenko, and Kopra will join Expedition 46 that will be underway, that formally begins at the time of undocking a few hours from now, under the command of a NASA one-year crew member, Scott Kelly, along with Kornienko and Sergei Volkov. And now we're getting video back, reacquiring our downlink television signal from the International Space Station through the tracking and data relay satellite system. You're looking at the camera being positioned, looking straight on to the hatchway that connects the Rosviet module to the Soyuz TMA-17M spacecraft, to which Kononenko, Lindgren, and Yui will be entering and closing the hatch to just a short time from now. All of the pre-landing preparations are going extremely well, both on board the International Space Station and at the landing site in Kazakhstan, where touchdown is expected about 7 hours from now. Kelly, Kornienko, and Volkov on board the International Space Station as a 3-man crew will get a few days off following an extremely busy period of time awaiting the arrival of the Cygnus vehicle that was grappled and berthed successfully 2 days ago to the Earth-facing port of the Unity module. The cargo transfer there from that resupply vehicle well underway. And Kelly, Kornienko, and Volkov will catch their breath a bit before the arrival of Kopra, Malenchenko, and Peake on December 15th to re-up the station back to a half-dozen residents on board the orbital laboratory. Once again, undocking is scheduled at 3:49 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time. That will occur after the command is issued about a minute and a half earlier to open up the hooks holding the Rosviet module to the Soyuz spacecraft itself. A minute and a half later, springs on both sides of the docking interface will push off against one another for the separation, the physical separation of the Soyuz from Rassvet. 3 minutes after physical separation at 3:49 and 30 seconds will be the separation burn, a short 8-second burst of the Soyuz engines to begin an opening rate that will ultimately result in the station fading from view as the Soyuz drifts away to a distance of about 12 kilometers for a 4-minute, 40-second deorbit burn that will occur at 6:19 and 19 seconds a.m. Central Time to slow the Soyuz down by 128 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its high-speed reentry back into the Earth's atmosphere, and its computers targeting a landing about 78 miles to the northeast of the town of Zhezkazgan, 1 hour and 43 minutes after sunset. As we await the crew gathering for their final farewells, that should be taking place just a short time from now. The International Space Station currently flying 253 statute miles above the Earth, moving from southwest to northeast over Singapore, about to cross into the South China Sea, then just to the south of Taiwan, and across the Japanese island chain. All of the station systems are operating in excellent shape. You're taking a look right now at the Ultraflex solar arrays, those circular solar arrays. That is the Cygnus resupply vehicle, and right next to it is the Soyuz TMA-17M, to which Kononenko, Yui, and Lindgren will be undocking from, and the Rassvet module is currently attached to. Again, the undocking scheduled at 3:49 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time, just about 3 hours from now, 3.5 hours from now. And there you see in the field of view 2 of the 3 returning crew members. In the hatchway is Oleg Kononenko, the Soyuz commander. Just outside of the hatchway is Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kimiya Yui. This should be, yes, it is, Kjell Lindgren floating into the field of view as the 3 crew members prepare to move into the Soyuz vehicle and close the hatch to mark the end of their stay on board the International Space Station. Once they move into the Soyuz and close the hatch, then they will transfer the Soyuz to autonomous power. Its systems were activated about 2 hours ago in advance of hatch closure. And in the middle of your view, partially obscured, that's Sergei Volkov, who will be working on the closing of the hatches and leak checks that will take place, along with Oleg Kononenko on the other side of the Soyuz hatch interface, once the hatches between Soyuz and the Rassvet module are formally closed. Now seeing the crew saying farewell to one another, obviously wishing the departing crew soft landings, as Yui, Kononenko, and Lindgren prepare to make their way through the hatchway, leaving Kelly, Kornienko, and Sergei Volkov behind as a three-man crew on board the International Space Station, but for a very brief period of time, just 4 days. On the left side of your picture is the leg of Scott Kelly. On the right, Mikhail Kornienko and Sergei Volkov is at the hatchway. Kelly and Kornienko in the home stretch now of their one-year mission on board the International Space Station. Their own landing scheduled for the morning of March 2nd, Kazakhstan time, the evening of March 1st, U.S. time, to wrap up with what at that time will be a 340-day mission since their launch back in March from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. And the hatch between Rosviet and the Soyuz vehicle closed at 9:32 a.m. Moscow time, 12:32 a.m. Houston time. Hatch closed at 12:32 a.m. Central Time, 9:32 a.m. Moscow time. Sergei Volkov in the field of view as he prepares to begin the process of leak checks with Oleg Kononenko on the other side of the docking interface, the hatch closure occurring as the International Space Station passed 253 statute miles over Taiwan. Again, the time of hatch closure between the Soyuz TMA-17M and the Rosviet module, 12:32 a.m. Central Time, 1:32 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:32 a.m. here at the Russian Mission Control Center on the outskirts of Moscow. A few minutes from now, Kononenko, the Soyuz commander, will transfer the Soyuz from International Space Station power to autonomous power for the remainder of the day through its landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. In about 30 minutes, the crew will begin the process of depressurizing the small passageway between the hatchways of Rosviet and the Soyuz. They'll perform leak checks to make sure that it is depressurized down to vacuum in advance of the undocking of the Soyuz from Rosviet that is scheduled at 3:49 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time this morning. There you see animation of what will occur at the time the Soyuz undocks from the Rosviet module at 3:49 a.m. Central Time. It will move to a point 12 kilometers away from the International Space Station for a deorbit burn that will be initiated at 6:19 and 19 seconds a.m. Central Time, a 4-minute, 40-second deorbit burn to allow the Soyuz to drop out of orbit. Once it reaches before it reaches the traces of the Earth's atmosphere, the pyrotechnic separation of the 3 sections of the Soyuz will take place. The descent module's heat shield will repel temperatures that will build up around the Soyuz to about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. As it approaches the landing site, first a drogue chute will be deployed, followed by the deployment of the main chute, a sprawling main chute that will slow down the Soyuz. Soft landing engines will fire just a few feet above the ground, and the Soyuz will touch down on what is expected to be a snowy landing site in Kazakhstan at 7:12 and 14 seconds a.m. Central Time to wrap up the 141-day mission of Kononenko, Lindgren, and Yui.
There may be a message on the caution warning panel on the laptop. The MRM-1 feeder off nominal deactivation, that's an expected message, so don't be surprised or alarmed. Okay, so we'll just basically clear that message and call that down to you. Or do we even need to call it down? Yeah, as soon as you see that message pop up, please let us know that it's displayed, just to keep us posted. Okay. If it does, we will let you know.
So once again, the hatch was closed to the Soyuz TMA-17M spacecraft. Hatch closure occurring at 12:32 a.m. Central Time, 9:32 a.m. Here in Moscow. Kononenko, Lindgren, and Yui are aboard the Soyuz to begin the process of depressurizing the passageway, the small vestibule between the Soyuz and the Rosviet module, to which it has been linked since the Soyuz was launched back on July 23rd. The crew will conduct leak checks of that vestibule before donning their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits and conducting systems checks prior to the time of the command for the undocking of the Soyuz, with physical separation scheduled at 3:49 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time this morning. So that'll wrap up our hatch closure broadcast. We will be back on the air in less than 3 hours at 3:30 a.m. Central Time with our undocking coverage as Kononenko, Lindgren, and Yui are on the first stages of a long day's journey back to Earth to wrap up 141 days in space. We'll see you back in a few hours at 3:30 a.m. Central Time. For now, this is Mission Control Korolyov.
Hi folks, this is Brian May and this is NASA TV, taking us out into the solar system and beyond. Rock on.